I'm going to tell you a story about an investor in Greece, but the fact that this investor is in Greece matters less than you probably think, as it's a story relevant to investors everywhere. Investors who are seeking to protect their savings in a low-yield environment. Marina Hilla is a 45-year-old political science lecturer at the University of Crete. She has a PhD from the University of York in the UK. It would be fair to describe her as both politically aware and highly educated. So it wasn't surprising that her family turned to her for advice about where to invest the money they received from a shop they had recently sold. The shop was in Piraeus, the principal port of Athens. Originally owned by Miss Hilla's grandfather, the business that had been renting the shop went bankrupt and no new tenant could be found. Despite being vacant, the shop still attracted property tax. That's why the family resolved to sell the shop. But where to put the proceeds? If it were you, would you keep the money in Greece? I bet you wouldn't, and neither did Miss Hilla. Like investors all over the world, she sought a safe haven, an investment that would return her principal and provide a shield from inflation. Miss Hilla looked to invest in Northern Europe, in core countries with AAA ratings. And she looked at bonds rather than equities, not wanting to take risks in the stock market. And then she narrowed down to subordinated bonds in Dutch banks. The country has a large financial sector relative to its size, and the government has stood behind it, already having provided some 30 billion of direct support by 2009. Miss Hilla bought subordinated bonds of S&S Bank, with a maturity in 2020 and a coupon of 6.25%. That was in November 2012. But the bank she invested her savings, her father's savings, and her sister's savings in was nationalized by the Dutch government on February 1st, 2013. Miss Hilla's investment went to zero in one night. 1 billion of subordinated creditors also saw their investments go to zero. We know what you're thinking. Caveat emptor, right? But know this. Miss Hilla's November purchase was made at 86 cents on the euro. The day before the nationalizations, her holdings were down by only 4%. Also at the time of her investment, the bank's subordinated debt rating was Ba2 according to Moody's and BB plus by S&P, just below investment grade. What's going on here? S&S Bank may not be big on the world stage, but it is the fourth largest bank in the Netherlands. And with its nationalization, it may become famous for something else. Famous for proving that bond buyers had become dangerously accustomed to some form of compensation in the face of government intervention. Precedents to date, such as the partial write-offs of junior debt of Irish banks and indeed Greek sovereign debt, saw investors receive some compensation in the distressed entities they had invested in. As for Miss Hilla and the other investors in S&S, the final kick in the shins came on Monday, when they received confirmation that no compensation would be forthcoming. It's not that the problems with S&S Bank were a big secret. The bank had acquired a property portfolio from ABN AMRO back in 2006, but that had since soured. Following from that, in 2012, a solution involving the other three big Dutch banks was contemplated to plug the capital hole wrought by the fast deteriorating property portfolio. The European Commission wouldn't allow it. And still another possible solution involving a private equity investor was pursued, but that too came to nothing. While distressed banks are no new thing, the legislation to deal with them is. What happened to S&S's subordinated debt holders brings into focus the fact that some governments have preempted European legislation on bank resolution. The Dutch Intervention Act came into force last June, granting considerable powers to the government and the regulator in the presence of a threat to financial stability. Other countries with so-called bail-in legislation are already in effect in the UK, Germany, Denmark, Ireland, and Spain. Complete write-offs for junior debt are now the new precedent, not just partial ones. Buyer beware.